Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Fired Up. It's great to see you all, and I'm joined today by Nicole Pytel. Hey, Nicole, how are you?
Hey, Morgan, I'm great. Hey, everybody.
So here we are. It's the first full week after Labor Day, and this is the period of time in the year where things really start to happen. So we're excited, the push towards the end of the year, and I don't know whether about you, Nicole, but I'm feeling like there's more funding going in. People are making decisions. It's go time out there right now.
It's that time of year. Maybe it was your funding announcement blog post that triggered it. No, but we've heard from a number of startups. There is more funding out there. We're seeing it. We're seeing announcements with startups we don't work with. So good to see. It's good to see a little bit of a resurgence here.
Yeah, we'll see the numbers in terms of VC investments in August when they come out. But an article did just catch my eye about the opposite end of the market on the IPO side. Typically in August, companies start to do their rounds for IPO. In prior years, Snowflake has been one. But I just saw an article on Crunchbase here saying, look, we haven't seen that in August as much this year, meaning that there are a number of companies, Stripe and Databricks, et cetera, who are sort of on the ramp towards IPO, but they're not doing the tour as far as people can tell, which means they probably won't go public during this next phase towards the end of the year. And some of the conjecture was, look, you don't really want to be going public around the election, so wait until next year. So maybe we won't see that part of it this year. I don't know.
Yeah, I can't say that I'm shocked by that revelation. We don't really want to commit to a whole lot. Let's see where things shake out at the end. So that news doesn't totally surprise me. I think a lot will be unveiled by the end of 2024. And then hopefully people will feel more comfortable about moving forward in whichever direction they want to go in.
And we should hear in a few days, I think on the 18th, about the Fed rate cut and see whether they're going to start their cutting cycle. I think it's much anticipated. Anyway, we are seeing more companies at the earlier stage start to get funded. So that is good. But today we're going to talk about fractional CMOs and specifically, how do you set up a fractional CMO for success? Obviously, you've got a problem. You need to bring in outside help, but how do you find that person and how do you make sure that it works?
Yeah, we have a great guest today. I'm excited to ask her a lot. I have many questions about the fractional CMO role and how it works and the timing and how do they manage other people in the company? Do they manage other people in the company? How are they managed? How are they judged? All of these things. I have all of these questions in my head and I am so excited to ask this guest all of them.
We're going to be talking to Jessica Zall, who is a fractional CMO and has been a CMO, as I guess you'd expect. She focuses in the fintech space, mainly B2B, and as a longtime fractional CMO. So please join me in welcoming Jessica Zall to Fired Up. Jessica, hi, welcome to Fired Up. It's great to see you. How are you?
Good to see you too. I'm well. Can't believe the summer's over.
Yes.
Or almost over.
In San Francisco, it sort of carries on for a little bit, so hanging in there. So thanks for joining us today. We're going to talk about how you sort of set up a fractional CMO for success. And obviously you are a fractional CMO. And just sort of as a quick intro, I want to know, when we talk about fractional CMO, what's the difference between a fractional CMO and a marketing consultant?
They're different, but they're similar in the same way. Both are consultants. Fractional CMO is really more of your experienced marketing executives who work with companies on a part-time or contract basis. They tend to provide more of the higher level strategic marketing leadership without the need for full-time commitment. Oftentimes, your fractional CMOs work with multiple companies at the same time, helping them develop and execute marketing strategies, drive growth, mentor internal teams. They often serve businesses that need a senior marketing expertise, but they may not have the resources or the need for a full-time CMO. Where a marketing contractor, they're also a consultant. They also can be temporary part-time. They're hired for very specific tasks or projects in the marketing function. They're often brought in to execute very specific campaigns, manage specific aspects of digital marketing or develop content. And they generally work under the direction of marketing leadership. The fractional CMO may bring them in a marketing contractor. And again, they're focused more on execution rather than high level strategy, which the FCMO is going to be focused on.
Right. The fractional CMO is providing the strategy and the leadership, but a marketing consultant comes in to deliver, can be quite senior, but comes in to deliver a particular work stream.
Digital content events. In fractional CMO roles, I wind up having a lot of marketing contractors that are doing just that: content, digital, growth marketing events.
People who you've worked with before, who you can drop in and help a startup with your sort of ready-made team of trusted people that you work with. And when a startup thinks about bringing in a fractional CMO, what are their goals and what are the problem that they're trying to solve?
They may have a number of different goals, really. They may need something like strategic marketing leadership. They may be scaling. They may also have a positioning or messaging need or exercise that they need FCMO to come in on. With the scalability and growth, they may need somebody to develop demand gen and lead gen programs for the first time, or fine tune them to hit that scalability and growth. They may also need to build a marketing foundation, right? I've got clients that actually have me come in and may either have me build everything from the ground up or start with something that's like been done 0.5 to 1. They need a comprehensive marketing strategy that aligns with their business objectives. So somebody to go in, understand what the corporate objectives are, understand what the revenue and sales growth is, that the plan is, and then develop like an end-to-end comprehensive marketing strategy around that. A lot of times startups lack the processes and the resources, right? So they need somebody to come in and actually build that foundation, build the processes, build the resources, create what a proper budget looks like, what the cost per lead model should be, the attribution model, the CAC model, all of those things. Same thing like with the architecture stack. What does your marketing technology look like? Do you have any? If you do, does it need fine tuning? Is it a data dump? Does it need to be completely overhauled? What are the processes around that? So it can be everything from soup to nuts, or it can be very, very specific areas. It really depends on what the company needs.
Big stuff and stuff that would take a full-time CMO a long time to do. So what is the engagement like here? How long does this typically take? How many days per week do you typically work for one client? Can you even be a permanent fractional CMO if that's not an oxymoron of sorts?
That's an excellent question too. Again, it all depends on the company's needs, where the company is, and the existing infrastructure, the existing resources, the existing staff that the company has. I mean, you could have something that is very short term, right? You could have something where a fractional CMO is brought in for a very specific project or to address immediate needs, right? And that could be anywhere from 3 to 6 months. I recently had an engagement that was about 3.5 months. I was there. They had very limited resources. They needed to overhaul their infrastructure. They needed to build up their team from a consulting perspective, and they needed an end-to-end strategy so that the folks that are on the team could just then execute. You've also got longer term things. You've got more midterm engagements. This is probably more common versus the short term. Again, it all depends on where the startup is, right? If it's a startup that, again, is really struggling, doesn't have leadership, and just quickly needs something to get the team in shape, you may see that as a smaller term commitment. More midterm commitments, again, that's more common. That's where the CMO is there for about 6 to 12 months. Again, they may also help set up the marketing strategy, oversee the end-to-end implementation. They may train in-house replacement, right? And that may not be a CMO. That may be a director of marketing. Especially with startups, startups don't need a CMO. I've seen a lot of startups make the mistake of having a more senior CMO, where they often do that for fundraising, right? Because your VCs want to see a deep bench of expertise, but that CMO tends to only last maybe a year or two because that is their scope of work, right? It's more of the team under them that are going to be doing the executing. And then again, you've got longer term engagements, right? Some fractional CMOs may become permanent. They may be there for many years, really continuing on until the business reaches a specific milestone. It could be scaling to a new market or creating a very compelling campaign. And then really, Nicole, in terms of addressing like the days per week, again, that also depends on the client, the need, how the fractional CMO works, the number of clients he or she has as well. It could be 1 to 2 days per week, 3 to 4, could be ad hoc or flexible. For some of my clients, I work 1 to 2 days per week. For some that it's maybe like a 3.5-month commitment, and I may need to give them, in order to complete the deliverables, I may need to give them like 5 hours a day for 5 days a week in order to really get everything done in that short amount of time so that they can then just go and execute.
Right. So that makes good sense to me. If you've got a short-term problem, our leads are not converting, we need to fix this as soon as possible. You don't have the resources in-house to do it. You're going to bring in a fractional CMO to help that. And that might be a 90-day project, but you're going to need a lot of that person's time to fix it in that short burst. If you've got a more sort of strategic issue, how do we start implementing an ABM motion, or we want to do it into PLG? I don't know, whatever it might be. This is going to take some time, and I don't need you there every day. I need you there a couple of days a week to guide my team through the process, because you've done it before and they have maybe not, and help my head of marketing sort of get up, show them what you've learned and get up to that level. And then you can step back 1 day a week, or an advisor role, or out at that point, because the 6-month project or the year project is done.
Yep. And sometimes those can become long-term or semi-permanent. They can be that 1 to 2 days per week for 4 years until the company is ready at that time to have a CMO.
When we're talking about sort of success with this kind of exercise, bringing in a fractional CMO, it sounds like choosing the right fractional CMO at the beginning is absolutely critical. And what should the process be there? Should they build a short list? What should they be looking for in a fractional CMO for their startup?
Selecting the right fractional CMO is so crucial for a startup's success. The wrong choice can lead to wasted resources, missed opportunities, right? But before a company, a startup even looks for a CMO, they really first need to make sure that they understand the role of a CMO, what the CMO is actually there to do. Also make sure that they really understand and they've clarified what their needs are, right? Does the startup have clearly defined needs and goals, right? Do they need brand positioning? Do they need go-to-market strategy? Do they need customer acquisition, the initial stages of that, right? Do they need scaling? I also think it's important that they either have an understanding of or admit that they don't have an understanding of marketing. Making sure from the get-go that their expectations of an FCMO are clear, or that they're willing to understand what those should be. Kind of from there, that's where you narrow down candidates that have specific expertise in these areas. It's okay if I basically need somebody to come in and do end-to-end strategy. That's going to include a little bit of brand positioning, messaging. That's going to include client acquisition. That's going to include some refining the go-to-market strategy, et cetera. Then they can start to figure out, okay, I know what I need. I know what a fractional CMO does. Then I can start to figure out what is the duration in terms of commitment time, the time frame that I want to have. And then how much of that person do I need during that time frame? And then what can I afford as well? Because fractional CMOs, you're generally not paying, well, sometimes you are paying somebody by the hour, but it's generally more than a contractor. How do you go about finding that person? Generally, what happens for me is mine's usually through recommendations or referrals, right? Through investors, advisors, other entrepreneurs that the fractional CMO has worked with. That's usually one of the best ways, is through recommendations for startups to bring on an FCMO. There's also industry associations, right? That they have a roster of fractional CMOs. There are websites as well, collectives that have FCMOs too, like Chief Outsiders, which I'm a part of, Fractionals United, there's CMOX, there's Growth Collective, et cetera. Then there's also agencies, marketing agencies that either do their own marketing as a service or CMO as a service. I have a number of agencies that I've worked with in the past that now have started to offer CMO as a service. And then, of course, there's LinkedIn searches. And I think the other question that you asked was, how do you build the short list, right? Where do you look? But also, what should you as a CEO or a CRO or a board member look for in an actual fractional CMO? There's a lot of things here. You're going to want to look at industry experience. Is this B2B SaaS? Is it B2C? Is it CPG? Is it fintech? What type of industry knowledge does this person have? It doesn't necessarily mean that that has to be their whole background. You should have somebody that has experience in the industry or a related field so they understand the competitive landscape. They can easily understand and get to know the product. They can easily understand and get to know the customers, the personas, stakeholders, etc. You want somebody that has a track record. Have they done this before in similar sized companies or taken them to the next level or in bigger sized companies? What has been their success? Have they decreased CAC? Right? Have they decreased cost per leads? Have they increased revenue? Have they increased client acquisition? Have they successfully scaled, launched new products? A big thing too is cultural fit. Can they adapt, right? Have they been in dynamic startups before? Can they survive in that space? Startups are a challenging space. We go a mile a minute and you may be doing one thing and going down one lane in one instance. And then 2 days later, boom, it's the other lane. So can you be adaptable? Do you have the same communication styles that work within the company, whether it's within the team, cross-functionally, or amongst your peers on the executive team? Strategic thinking, right? Can you see the big picture? Can you see the broader market? Can you align strategies with business goals? Do you understand the revenue model, the sales process? And can you create strategies that align with that? Being able to execute as well. You come in at a strategy level, but there's often startups that need a bit of execution. You got to be able to roll up your sleeves and get it done. Can you manage resources? Startups have limited resources, but you still need to be able to test. So you need to have some resources to get the job done and some budget to test things out. I think other things to look for is client satisfaction. Have other clients been satisfied with this fractional CMO? And does your CMO have a good network? We talked about before the difference between a fractional CMO and a marketing consultant. Oftentimes that fractional CMO needs to bring in marketing consultants. What is their network? How quickly can they come in, land, and expand?
There's so many things to think about. It's not bringing in the quote unquote average consultant. This really is somebody at the highest levels of your company doing some of the most important things your company is going to do. What I took from all of that is that communication is absolutely vital. You as the startup need to be clear on what you're looking for, what you need, what you know, what you don't know, maybe a little bit of self-reflection there. And then you need a fractional CMO or a candidate that gets it and can deliver all of those things and get aligned and make sure that everybody's on the same page. But that's only the beginning of the communication that's going to happen here. So when a fractional CMO actually starts working, where should they report in? What kind of resources should the startup allocate to onboard them, manage them? Because this is a brand new marketing leader for your organization.
I generally feel that a fractional CMO, much like a full-time CMO, should report to the CEO, especially when the marketing strategy is tied closely to the company's overall vision and growth goals. Having that direct line to the CEO really allows that CMO to align the marketing efforts with the company's strategic objectives and have the necessary influence over other departments. It basically gives that CMO the authority and the visibility that they need to be able to implement change and drive results, especially as a fractional CMO. And then it provides more clear communication between marketing, the overall business, as well as with other groups. There are some cases, though, where it could be more beneficial for marketing to align to, or marketing to report to the board or advisors, or at least, if not report, have direct and clear access to the board of directors or key advisors, especially if marketing is included in the marketing efforts with the company's strategic objectives, and have the necessary influence over other departments. It basically gives that CMO the authority and the visibility that they need to be able to implement change and drive results, especially as a fractional CMO. And then it provides more clear communication between marketing, the overall business, as well as with other groups. There are some cases, though, where it could be more beneficial for marketing to align to, or marketing to report to the board or advisors, or at least, if not a critical component of the startup's growth strategy. Again, this really helps ensure alignment at the highest levels, right? It depends on how much control and influence that board has and where that company is. Are they pivoting? Are they transitioning? Have they really struggled to get product market fit and reach the desired revenue results? That's where I think it's probably better to have a CMO, a fractional CMO, report to the board. And then you asked a question, Nicole, in terms of the resources that would be valuable for the FCMO when they come into the organization. Was that right?
Yeah. Getting that person up to speed and just getting them on the path to where everybody's decided they want to go.
Onboarding is so big and so important because, especially for somebody new to the company, right? Think about the fractional CMO doesn't always have the luxury of time that a full-time CMO or a full-time person coming in, where you've got your first 30, 60, 90 days, right? And it's kind of a slower learning curve. Granted, your fractional CMO should still have that 30, 60, 90 days, right? However, they tend to have to operate a bit more quickly because if they're brought in for that short term, they don't have 90 days to really get to know the business. So you want to try and saturate them with as much content, as much information, bring them into as many things as possible, but also setting clear expectations as to what that fractional CMO can do. So this is where there's kind of a balance between how much they do and how much they need to know, if that makes any sense, how much time they have and what they can actually know, right? That's why having somebody that has a background in that business could be very important. But I think what they need the company overview. They need the history, the vision, the mission, the values. They can understand the company culture and the long-term objectives. They really should have access to the P&L and understand the revenue, all of the financials in the organization, access to all existing marketing materials, right? Marketing assets, campaigns, analytics, performance data, so that the fractional CMO can assess current strategies and identify if there are quick wins or gaps to close and areas needing immediate attention. Product demos, product service deep dives, right? What's the roadmap? Again, I mentioned the demo. What's the competitive intelligence? What's the competitive analysis, the landscape, right? What's the customer feedback? Speaking to customers can be key. Again, this is a lot of information. So it all depends on what that engagement looks like and what the KPIs, which I'm sure we'll get to, are, and what the FCMO actually has the time to do. Team introductions, making sure that, that fractional CMO is not siloed in the organization, that they're a part of the full organization and they've been introduced to all of the relevant teams: sales, customer success, product, engineering, finance, HR, investor relations, etc. Making sure that they're set up from a MarTech perspective, access to tools and platforms. I think I mentioned earlier performance and analytics and all of that data, making sure that they know they have access to the key metrics, the website analytics, customer data, any dashboards, they can see the performance. And that they have the tools, or if they don't have the tools, they have the ability, they have resources to build out those tools so that they can measure the impact of new strategies going forward.
So just to be clear, when the fractional CMO comes in, if there's an existing marketing team, we have someone in demand gen and what have you, they should report up into the fractional CMO because that person is the marketing leader, even if that person is only intended to be there for the next 6 months, let's say. Is that the common sort of reporting line?
In the companies that I have been in, yes. And I've also been in companies where they report half and half. That is my recommendation. That's how I've seen it be most successful, because then that fractional CMO is often training somebody. I actually have seen a fractional CMO onboard another CMO because that fractional CMO is like, I'm only fractional. This is all I want to do. I want to get out. So I'll transition things to you. It's most successful when that team reports up into marketing because of a couple different reasons, right? Accountability, cohesiveness, and alignment to the marketing strategy, as well as access to the executive team. Because there is transparency that flows down from the executive team to the FCMO to the team. So it allows for transparency within the organization. And at the end of the day, it puts the customer first.
So this is very critical. I mean, just to recap, we've got a really meaningful problem with our startup that we need extra marketing leadership to solve. We have to take the time to find the right person through recommendation, through our network. There are some sites. You've got to find someone at the right size of startup who's maybe worked for one that's just a bit bigger than yours, not much bigger, because then they're going to have different levels of resources and different kinds of problems. They might not be as hands-on as what you specifically need. They need to have domain expertise because they're only here for 6 months, so they've got to be able to ramp quickly. They won't have the sort of calendar to get into the sort of cadence of the business. They've got to kind of come in quickly. You've got to spend some time onboarding them. We just talked about, hey, you got access to the marketing stack and all that. They've got to go to the materials, all the analytics, etc. They're going to be reporting to the CEO or up into the board, so very high profile, taking some time from the CEO to do some of this stuff. So there's opportunity cost in there. And then your permanent full-time marketing team are reporting up into this new leader who is coming in from outside the business. So has to also learn the culture and how to evaluate people and their goals and motivate. It's a great opportunity for those people, but it's also a change of line report. So this is critical to get right. But let's say we're getting that correct. When, we're making the lift, what should a startup reasonably expect during that sort of first 90 days as a CMO? Like, what are the common projects that they normally sort of get through up front that you tend to find? Okay, you mentioned, for instance, analytics, and most of the companies that we see, there is some information, but there's a lot of gaps and attribution is wrong, for example. But like, what should a startup expect within the first 90 days?
Oh, I think the first thing really is having a 30, 60, 90-day plan. Again, it's going to depend on the length of engagement as well, right? So that's first and foremost, right? What are the company's needs? What are their goals? What is the length of engagement, right? Before anything really can happen. When that's a fractional CMO comes in, they should present a 30, 60, 90-day plan. Okay, I'm here for 6 months, let's say. I'm only here for 1 to 2 days a week, right? Let's just say that's 18 hours a week, because let's all be honest, there's no 8-hour work days. Generally it's 10 to 12, but because I don't want to scare people, let's just say it's 18 to 20. I think if it was me, it's probably going to be 2 10-hour days. So that's 20 hours a week. So that's that 30, 60, 90 plan. I'm going to use an example that this is for a company that there really isn't anything, right? There are some basic styles. Maybe they have a CRM, but they really need to start building from the ground up. So let's take that example, because this is not cookie cutter. You can't just adapt this to everything. Really depends on the size of the company, where they're at, their goals, and what they have. So if we're using that example, then things really need to be built either from the ground up or from like 0.25, 0.5 to 1.5, something like that. So take a Series B, B2B startup that's sales led and maybe has a 1-person marketing team, right? They've got some brand identity, they've got some visualization, some high level messaging, they have a CRM. They don't have an end-to-end proper strategy. They've never had one before. So they need to create a proper end-to-end strategy to go after B2B. Maybe it's the persona is like a director of finance or something like that. They need to increase lead generation because they've had some lead generation, but it's not really scalable. They're not seeing the results. They need to fine-tune messaging for a wider audience. They need to develop more infrastructure. So I mentioned your 30, 60, 90 plan, marketing strategy, an execution program. They may not be doing the execution program. They may be developing it, right, upon the strategy that these are the areas that you want to focus, and then this is how we're going to do it. What's the budget needed to support that? And actually before that, what are the KPIs? What are the goals that you need to meet? And then what is the budget to support that, right? How does that align to sales? Because in a B2B sales-led organization, it's got to be fully lined up with sales and customer success, because marketing is your full customer life cycle. Oftentimes it's developing or outlining a sales toolkit, what the sales team will need, marketing toolkit as well. That's oftentimes the content strategy. It's assessing and sometimes staffing the headcount, right? So assessing what are the needs to support this. It's assessing and starting to create the messaging hierarchy, the architecture. And I would say it's mainly those things, right? Because 2 days a week, 20 hours a week for 90 days. That's really, when you think about it, what is that? That's a month and a half, right? So you have to be focused on getting the basic things done. That strategy, assessing and providing recommendations for resource limitations, providing recommendations for budget, providing recommendations for the KPIs that you want to measure to track the progress of marketing. Oftentimes in those 90 days, you're not going to get to execution unless you are 60 hours a week or unless you already have a big team. That's why it's so important for an organization that's bringing in a fractional CMO to understand what marketing can and cannot do in their organization. So you can get a lot of misaligned expectations. You can have a lot of failure if the organization doesn't understand the role of an FCMO, what marketing is and what marketing can and can't do, and the duration. You can't expect to have results in 3 months.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that your 90 days isn't 90 days, not 90 full days.
A full-time person, 90 days, it's impossible. I look at the work that I did at Percent, right, where I was a full-time CMO. And I mean, I was probably working 70 hours a week. And I love that company. We actually got a ton of stuff done in 90 days because we were doing a rebrand and a whole website launch. But that's what we focused on. We didn't do the strategy. We didn't do the infrastructure. We did a bare bones hiring, right? We said, okay, this is the stuff that we know we need to do in order to be able to move to that next phase.
And part of that and going at that pace and maybe laser focusing on one thing at a time, it does require buy-in from above. And I like the point that you made about how the CEO and the board, they really have to understand marketing and what marketing's capable of to really set those expectations properly. It's not just set it and forget it, bring in a fractional CMO and figure out what they can do and hand it to them and see what happens. So we've talked about a little bit about KPIs. You've mentioned them a couple of times. What are those specific KPIs? How are you being managed? Because when you're doing something as big as end-to-end strategy or MarTech development or lead generation, like those are huge things. So how should the startup kind of break those down into more manageable KPIs so that you can see, yes, progress is being made?
I think it depends. Your question was how should the role be measured? Again, it depends on a number of different factors. It depends on what the needs. Let's go back to what we talked about originally. Like, what are the needs? What is your fractional CMO coming in to do? Are they coming in to do brand positioning? Are they coming to do marketing strategy? Are they coming in to do everything, right? Because you've got companies, you're actually coming in to do absolutely everything. And then you have companies that, okay, I've got XYZ in place, but I need somebody to lead, mentor, manage, and help reposition the brand, right? So those are very different things, especially when they're already KPIs in place and marketing may be performing at a certain level and you need to scale. So again, it's what are the needs and goals of the startup, right? And is it short-term, long-term? What does the 30, 60, 90-day plan look like? If they're only there for 90 days to do a strategy, in that 30, 60, 90 plan, are they meeting everything? Are you ticking those boxes, right? Because you may not get down to the KPIs if they are there for 3 months. You may not be measuring them by number of leads, number of meetings booked, conversion rates, CAC, CPL, ROI. You may not be able to get to that. It may be, okay, this is the 30, 60, 90 plan. Have you done the strategy? Have you created the budget? Have you created the KPIs? Have you hired these consultants? Have you done the content strategy? Have you done the SEO strategy? Has the messaging architecture been created? So again, it's really dependent, right? If it's a longer term engagement, you measure that by whether or not they're meeting the expectations and the KPIs that the company has established, right? That's where you get into, is CAC being reduced by whatever percentage that you wanted it to be reduced by? Or is your cost per lead being moved from $500 to $250 per lead? Are you decreasing or increasing conversion rates by 35%? Are you increasing followers? Is the time to meeting 13 touch points versus 25 touch points, right? Because we know 13 touch points is generally the ideal in a B2B world. How is the team performing? Another thing too that I think is really good is what is the 360 feedback? Because if it is more qualitative versus quantitative, how is the FCMO working with other members of the department, right? Are new products getting launched? Is it easier to move things forward, et cetera? So again, it's all dependent on the situation.
That's probably fair. If you're coming in to help with the strategy, you can see, is there a plan or not? You're going to have a good sense of, okay, this is working. This person's a good thought partner, like their process is buttoned up and we're going to get a good output here. And if it's longer, you're measuring the person based on common metrics you would measure a marketing department, whatever your business might be. So I'm interested for engagements that go sort of less well. What are the common causes of those engagements that we might be able to avoid in the future?
So I'm going to go back to what I had said before as for two first and foremost things. One of those is a lack of understanding of what a fractional CMO or a CMO does, what their role is, a lack of understanding or an unwillingness to understand what marketing is. And I say that lack and unwillingness because there are companies that have a lack, but they know they have a lack and they want something. Please come in, teach me about marketing. And I was in a great organization called Percent, which I always love to promote, that understood like the CEO was a founder CEO and he knew like, I don't understand X, Y, and Z, right? I need you to come in, help me understand that. And the organization, a lot of them came from capital markets, right? In the banks where marketing is very different there. Marketing may be press release, an event, design something. It's not client acquisition. It's not customer lifecycle marketing, et cetera. It's not customer marketing. So they needed a lot of education, but there was that willingness to learn, which makes a much more successful engagement for a permanent or a fractional CMO, is that their willingness to understand. If there is an unwillingness where you have a CEO, especially a founder CEO, that says, I know marketing, I just need you to do what I tell you to do, that's not going to work for a fractional CMO unless this founder CEO happens to know absolutely everything about marketing and was a CMO multiple times over, which you generally don't find. So that's the biggest thing. The second thing is putting unrealistic expectations and unachievable goals on marketing, especially in now B2C direct marketing is very different, right? My background, as I mentioned, is B2B, SaaS, and fintech, right? And it's heavy in the capital market space. It's in sales-led organizations. And marketing is woven throughout every part of that organization. Don't get me wrong. And marketing supports and drives the full customer life cycle, but it is relationship driven because oftentimes these organizations, you need salespeople that have been in the position of their clients that can sell to those clients, and you need to support them. Marketing may be doing the initial demand gen and creating that and then supporting throughout the full customer life cycle, but you need a strong sales team. And so when you put all the emphasis on marketing, and all the expectations, that's a big no. Why am I not getting any more leads? Why is this taking too long? Why are there too many touch points? I really urge founders and CEOs, look deeper into your company. I urge boards to look deeper into your company. How is the company being led? What is that focus? What is the bench of experience of your sales team? What is the customer satisfaction of your product? How is that product working? What is the product market fit? So those unrealistic expectations on marketing. And then I mentioned like the lack of focus. Lack of resources is another thing, expecting an FCMO to come in and you say, we need to generate X amount in revenue. And I've had the situation, we need to get to 10 million in revenue by the end of the year. And you have under $500,000 in revenue. You put together a budget that's designed for the C-level because that's who you're going after in certain departments, and your budget gets canned, right? So not having the resources. If you don't have the resources, that is okay. That is okay. But be honest about that in the beginning and set those expectations properly, honestly, with your fractional CMO, because you will set them up for failure. And I've seen that. So we said, lack of focus, unreal expectations, lack of understanding or willingness to understand, lack of resources, and unachievable goals.
That's great stuff. And you've given such great advice to startups. I feel like our startup friends out there who haven't done this before have gotten a real glimpse into what it's like. We've talked a lot about the startup side and what the startup should be providing. What would be your best advice for the fractional CMO coming into a new startup?
I'm going to go back to some of the things that I've just said, and I'm going to spin it to a marketing perspective, which is very important for the CMO, the fractional CMOs to hear, is make sure that you have that honest conversation with that founder, CEO, and her or his team on what the resources are, what the understanding of marketing is, what the expectations are. So when you are pitching clients and you are almost to close and you're going through the SOW and the contract, have as much clarity and accuracy as possible in terms of what you can and are willing to deliver and what you cannot do. Make sure that it is written down and then there is a clear understanding of the resources that are in place, the resources that you will have. As I mentioned, the understanding of marketing or the willingness to understand marketing. I would also say, ask about the revenue. Even with NDA, they may not give you access to the P&L. Find ways to, and I'm saying this so that CMOs don't get themselves into any, what's the word, not nefarious, but just negative experiences, right? Because those can damage your reputation. Figure out a way so that you can understand what the real revenue is and if it's achievable to meet those revenue goals. Because again, I go back to those unreal expectations. If somebody is saying we need to reach 10 million by the end of the year, and they say that they have 5 million, but they really don't, right? That's an unachievable goal. You cannot go from 0 to 1 like that in 3 or 4 months. It's not going to be possible unless there's already a bunch of stuff in the sales pipeline and you have a really strong sales team. Make sure also that I think when you are interviewing with the company, because a fractional CMO, you're going to go through a round of interviews, right? Just like you do from a full-time perspective. Meet the team, understand the product and the product market fit. And again, I just want to go back and I just want to dial down harder into being very conscious, accurate, and concise around those deliverables in terms of that length of engagement. So okay, I can meet every one of these, make sure that they understand I can do A, B, and C if I have X, Y, and Z. If I do not have X, Y, and Z, this is going to happen. So that there is clear accountability on both parts. I think it's so, so, so important for not only for a fractional CMO, but a CMO or anybody interviewing for a job to always be interviewing that company as well, because it has to be a good fit.
Yeah. And frankly, it's the same with agencies. And when we're talking to potential clients, we'll say, there are great companies out there that we have to be honest about. Hey, are we the right fit? Can we do this? Can we meet their expectations? And sometimes we have to be honest with us. I think it's the same with fractional CMOs where you can go, okay, I don't know whether I'm the best person for this. And something you say no to that and something else will always come up because every engagement has to be successful, and there are lots of options out there. So I do think that sort of humility is good and making sure you're setting yourself up for success. So some great advice in there about selecting the right CMO, fractional CMO, setting them up for success, onboarding them, giving them the right resources, being realistic about the goals and what someone can honestly deliver with the resources that you're giving them within the right timeline. And we've sort of talked about, hey, where does some of these things go wrong? And even some advice there for fractional CMOs on the other side, which I think if you're a startup, that's also interesting to know about what does it look like from the other side of the table. So thank you for that. Our next section is called FiredUp 5, and this is our quickfire round where we ask some sort of more personal and general questions. So I'm going to hand it over to Nicole to take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's have some fun. So first things first, what would you do if you weren't in marketing?
I love answering this question. I was hoping that you were going to ask this too. If I wasn't in marketing, and I always have hope that maybe someday I can do this, but I'm just getting too old. It's never going to happen, to be honest with you. I would have been a forensic psychiatrist like Jodie Foster in Silence of the Lambs. I always wanted to work for the FBI and study the minds of the criminally insane and serial killers. It sounds morbid and bizarre, but my brain operates a certain way that I just don't understand how the criminally insane can think that way. And I'm fascinated by the biology of their mind and how they can do the things they do, because I feel guilty when I kill a lantern bug here in New York City. And you're supposed to kill lantern bugs in New York City because they are an invasive species, and I can't do it. So it fascinates me.
That's a Hall of Fame answer to that question. We've had some good ones, but I think that could be the top. What is the best career advice you've ever been given?
I like this one too. Best career advice is that marketing is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Successful marketing requires long-term vision and consistent effort. It takes time. You need to build your base and then increase your mileage. So that's career advice, but that's career advice very specific to marketing, but it's something that has really resonated with me over the last 5 years that has saturated my career.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. What book do you most often recommend?
From a business perspective, because since we're talking marketing and business, I'm going to recommend this from a business perspective, especially because every startup I've been in has asked you to read books. I've usually been given a book a quarter. It's probably Blue Ocean Strategy, as it promotes the idea of focusing on creating and delivering unique value, which for me really aligns with my deep conviction that marketing needs to provide value as it steals people's time. It also says, I think Blue Ocean Strategy also says that the best way to beat the competition is to stop trying to beat the competition. And instead, companies should focus on creating new uncontested market spaces where they can dominate by delivering unique value.
So I love this question. I'm always so curious. Where do you get your best ideas?
That's a great question. The one that I love to answer. When I'm long distance running, I am a...
Me too. Same thing.
You get your best ideas running too?
Yep.
I will go out for 3 hours. And even if I'm with somebody, we're not always talking the whole time. That's where I'm thinking, or if I'm doing like a workout, like a 5 or 6 mile workout, that stuff will go through my brain. And that kind of correlates. That's also why I love that career advice around marathon, right? Marathon running and marathon strategies, right? Is I'm a distance runner. I'm usually running 1 to 2 marathons a year. Hence, marketing is like a marathon. That's where everything comes full circle to me.
Amazing. Well, I will never be a marathon runner, so I will give you that. But yes, running. Very good for ideas. Finally, we've got a few months left in 2024. What are you most excited for as we close out this year?
Oh, God. So many things. Number one, I think the year to end. 2024 just has not been a great year, I think, overall in the market. So I'm excited to, knock on wood, see the market pick back up. I think I'm excited to see the fractional CMO function and opportunity skyrocket. I don't want to say continue to skyrocket because it hasn't skyrocketed yet, but I see that upward trajectory. So I want to see it skyrocket. I also think I'd like to see by the end of this year, the CMO role get some love again. It's really taken a beating over the last 2 years, just seeing the articles, seeing the posts from fellow CMOs. There was an article, I don't know if it was in Forbes or something the other day about there's no longer a need for the CMO. I'd like to see CMOs get love because they are instrumental to an organization. So I think those are the big things.
Jessica, thanks so much for your time today. Some really good insights in there about how companies can set up the fractional CMO for success. And I agree with you. I think this is a growing role. And as the market picks up, we'll see far more engagement here. Now, if people want to reach out to you, where should they go?
Just find me on LinkedIn, Jessica Lynn Zall. Send me a DM. Be happy to connect and happy to chat further. That's the easiest way to find me.
Wonderful. Once again, thanks for your time. We look forward to talking to you again soon. Nicole, great to see you too. And we'll see the rest of you next week.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Morgan and Nicole. Really appreciate it.